Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Wisconsin lawmakers on alert tonight as the man accused of shooting two Minnesota lawmakers was reportedly targeting several here in Wisconsin as well.
Multiple reports say 11 Wisconsin lawmakers were on a list found in Vance Bolter's possessions, including Senator Tammy Baldwin, Congressman Mark Pocan. He says he and Congressman Gwen Moore were on that list. State Senator Kelda Royce telling our Milwaukee affiliate that she also was included. Authorities charging 57-year-old Vance Bolter with federal murder and stalking charges, meaning he could face the death penalty. That's in addition to state charges of murder and attempted murder. Jeremy Wall is hearing reaction from state lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. He's live in the newsroom. Jeremy.
Yeah, Cammie, today Senator Tammy Baldwin and State Representative David Steffen both condemning the attacks.
Well, this has been incredibly shocking. State legislators being targeted in this fashion. Never seen or heard anything like it, and it's very troubling.
Representative David Steffen says he's disgusted by the attacks over the weekend in Minnesota.
My first time I ran for office back in 2014, I received a death threat. And so this brought back memories of when that happened.
Senator Tammy Baldwin also speaking out, sharing her condolences for the victims and their families.
My heart goes out to the victims and their loved ones and all those in Minnesota impacted by this tragedy. And I also want to thank the law enforcement who put their lives on the line to apprehend the suspect last night.
Baldwin adds the attacks are not who we are as a country.
We must all come together to condemn this type of hate wherever it exists and remind ourselves that we are better than this.
Now, State Senator Kristen Dassler-Alfheim also releasing a statement saying in part, quote, "My heart goes out to the friends, families, and communities of the two Minnesota legislators and their spouses who were targeted in an act of political violence over the weekend. Violence is never the answer. Never. Grateful to the law enforcement at all levels in many states who worked diligently to apprehend the gunmen and keep folks safe." End quote. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos requested more security when the Assembly meets Wednesday. The Wisconsin State Senate Sergeant at Arms said in a statement there is increased security at the state capitol tonight. Reporting live in the newsroom, Jeremy Wall, Action 2 News.